There it is.
Well, welcome to the Picard maneuver. This is our first live streamed, or it's live now. We're going to put it on other stuff later. We're streaming currently just on Facebook. The plan is to somehow make this end up on YouTube.
Technology.
So this is our first time doing it. So there's going to probably be a couple technical issues. I've been a little under the weather today, so I apologize for that too. And
you should feel very bad about that.
Well, if I just start trailing off and not making any sense, which I already do normally, so I feel like I'm going to do that even more often, so Joel will step in and fix it. Anyway, I'm Tim.
No pressure. I'm Joel.
I should have done that,
yeah. And so we just watched episode 2. That just came out, I think, today, but also I think they leak it maybe like a little early, but you could watch it all day today. So we just watched it. I think Tim's watched it a couple times already.
Twice.
And first and foremost, I did not like this episode. As I'm like, where am I looking? I'm looking at the mic now. I didn't like this episode. Yeah, there, right? Or there?
No, it's there.
Huh. All right, we'll figure this out. I didn't like episode 2 as much as I liked the first episode. I definitely have more concerns. There were some things that we were worried about in the first episode that we thought maybe would be smoothed out, and so far it doesn't look like that's the case. So yeah, I wasn't a huge fan. There was definitely pros and cons, things I did like, and we'll kind of get more into that. What about you, Tim?
I mean, I think the biggest problem was that it was only 40 minutes. It was like 43 minutes in all, but with the opening credit and the last time on stuff at the start, it was like a 40-minute episode. It didn't have the same rush pacing problems that the first episode did, but it did feel like we didn't get that far into the story, and now we've seen 2 of 10 episodes, and it seems like all the episodes are just 40 minutes. I made a comment at one point, basically, you could see it's such a widescreen cinematic aspect ratio, but it's a 40-minute episode.
Yeah, it definitely feels too short. Like we said this the first episode. There was like, we were complaining about the pacing seemed really too fast. And then I remember at one point we thought, well, also, it's like they're really short. Like, it feels like it should be at least 60 minutes. I think maybe that would eliminate some of that feeling of like stuff's just being packed into there and like thrown at you. And you're like, almost like when the scene's done, you're reflecting on it going, wait, what did I just see? What just happened? So definitely short running time, hurting it a little bit. I think they could have done 60 minutes. I don't know why they didn't. But get back to us. Get back to us, CBS. So, yeah, I know you had some thoughts on the timeline.
Right. So the first thing we see in the sort of the cold open of the episode is there's a flashback to the Mars attack, and we see the Mars attack from another perspective.
Utopia Planitia.
And it does give us a solid time 14 years before, which changes what our perceived timeline was. So this is our timeline. Before we thought the Mars attack was after Romulus was destroyed, but it must be before. So assuming 2399 is when Picard is, and that's exactly 20 years after Nemesis in 2379. Right now, our best bet for the timeline is 14 years before that Mars attack, 2385. 12 years before that, Romulus destroyed. 10 years before. Anyway, so Picard retires should be 2399. And later in this episode, Agnes does point out that Dodge was basically introduced exactly 3 years ago, and she was completely had no background before 3 years.
Maybe we're done with that. But, I mean, Tim did a lot of work on that, so thank you, Tim. And we did an episode, if you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, and we've got someone watching saying some stuff's louder than others. I'm feeling probably like I'm louder than a lot of stuff because I get really loud. So
I was also just leaning forward when I was doing that, so I was probably super loud for that too.
But, yeah, so the timeline, yeah. So one of the things we thought initially is that clearly Dodge is not, she looks to be maybe, late 20s?
I think she's only like 19 or 20.
Okay, so like early 20s or late teens. And this is what she thinks, or whether she thought that or not. But she's an android. She was created, and it looks like her memories or whatever was created was a 3 years ago kind of thing.
There was a couple lines of dialogue in the first episode from Picard, basically, where he's like, I believe you believe, and those memories are real to you, lines like that, where it strongly implies that she has artificial memories. Although there's no real way for Picard to know that other than just his instincts at the time.
But of course, that would make sense
if she was only been around for 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And we also thought the scene in the first one where she talks to her mother, not her mother. This could be. We were thinking this could be one of the bad guys or like someone that works for the bad guys, which we'll talk about in a minute who the bad guys are. But so she has these implanted memories. Now we're also not sure about Soji, who is the twin sister who's still alive. What her understanding of her own life is. Does she know that she's a synth somewhere, that she's only existed for a short time, or does she also have these implanted memories and thinks she's 19, 20 years old and
right? Because presumably she hasn't been activated yet because they made a big deal.
She's activating.
Daj activating and she didn't even know. So Soji doesn't know yet, and that's I think sort of key. So probably she has these memories. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves as far as the order of what's going on in the episode. Back to the rogue synth attack. We sort of saw the rogue synth attack from another perspective, from the skeleton crew working there on First Contact Day.
Complaining about why do we have to work?
Yeah, they said skeleton crew a couple times, which for me, we don't know how big a skeleton crew is for the entire Utopia Planitia, but maybe a lot fewer people were working at the time than they're implying. As far as the death toll that we've gotten was, I think the initial death toll was 30,000, and then we got 60,000 in the interview in the first episode, something like that. So maybe the death toll has been inflated by somebody. What was interesting about the events there was we saw F8. F8 looked like he was being hacked, and then
you see his eyes glitch a little bit, and it's like something
takes him over. Which we've seen Data be hacked before too in similar ways. And there was something about the computer I said that that the synths have been compromised. Mm-hmm. Meaning the synths aren't part of like a revolution like on Blade Runner or something. It looks like the synths have been hacked by someone to do this. So it's not their fault. Although I did notice the character after it looks like he like turns the shields off or opens up something so that the attack can go through, and then he kills a bunch of humans with a laser, scalpel of some sort. He does commit suicide, and there was a look when he does the suicide thing where he seemed to be aware he was committing suicide, or maybe intentionally committing suicide because he knew what he did, or at least he was aware that he was doing something that was there. It seemed to imply that they're going to expand more about what actually some sort of sympathy of what they were thinking.
Yeah, and I did want to quickly mention that they had some character development of this F8 character before the scene happened, where they say, so did you have a good night last night, F8? And he says, hell yes. And so in kind of a data way, you have the humans interacting with him, trying to get like a human response, and you can see he has this kind of programmed response that's supposed to sound human. Then they tell him a joke, and he does kind of this data laugh, and they say, did you get the joke? And he says, no.
Yeah, he has a very first season reaction to jokes at Data.
I thought of that actually too, first because they ask him something, he starts going into too much detail. It was kind of like a first season Data. So I thought that was kind of interesting. We also have a comment here from Mac Murray, and he said he had the same feeling about the episode length, but then he started thinking about it as a movie in 10 parts, and he thought it worked in that context. So if you think about it being quick, but in the context of if you think about it, this long movie, then they're still kind of in the first act. So that kind of makes sense.
No, I absolutely agree, and I think that's part of the problem. Part of the frustration I think we're having with maybe some of the pacing between this episode and the last episode, where we don't feel they've gone that far in this episode, because we're really just seeing 10% of an overall movie arc.
Yeah.
So I guess technically we're still in sort of like the first act of the 3-act sequence of a movie where he's still in the call to action phase.
Right. Yeah. So that's the first scene, Utopia Planitia, Attack on Mars. It's a 14-year flashback. Then we cut back to, we go to the opening credits, which is something I enjoy. I like how they do the opening credits. And then scene 1 of episode 2 is we're back at the vineyard. We're hanging out with Picard. He's still kind of reflecting on the incident that happened where he got blown up. He's kind of like replaying the image of like him getting blown backwards from when Daj blew up.
Yeah,
but you can't see her in the image, though. You just see this explosion. And they're trying to figure out who did it. And this is the first time we have mention of the Jacques Vage,
and someone else later in the episode says Shot Arge,
and Jat Oj,
and Shot Vage.
Shut up, Wesley. So yeah, there's a few different pronunciations of this group, but they're essentially a secret Tal Shiar,
double secret cabal. Yeah. So the Tal Shiar are already this sort of secret police we've been introduced a few times before in Star Trek. which are popular aspects of the Romulan culture. One thing that's cool that is implied strongly by this scene, although maybe not explicitly said, is that Laris and Jabon are ex-Tal Shiar,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of cool about this character. But they wanted this sort of even deeper version of the Tal Shiar to come out, called the Vat Vash.
Shadbash.
Um,
More secret.
so they are suggested to be this thousands-year-old cabal that are bent on their deep loathing of androids and synths and AI. To me, that immediately felt a lot like Dune. So in Dune has a lot of these ancient secret cabals and secret societies within secret societies, and they're all thousands and thousands of years old. And Dune, they also have sort of a religious loathing of any sort of computers. They call it the Butlerian Jihad. In Dune, it's really effectively done in that they actually say, what would a spacefaring society be like that completely rejects computers of any kind? And they actually sort of deal with that as what that would actually look like. And it's super interesting. Here, we're sort of retconned that supposedly the Romulans, and particularly the Tal Shiar, particularly the double secret Tal Shiar, Vat Vash, are also like they're from the Dune universe.
Even though we've met Romulans before and they interact with Data, and we never really saw this ingrained hatred of...
Data's interacted them with before, and it's never really come up. We know for a fact that the Tal Shiar are really good at like hacking, and we're really good at encrypting communications. The Tal Shiar in a few episodes are really good at sort of reconstituting broken computers and holographic information. If you remember from Deep Space Nine episodes. So it's not super convincing that this is a part of the Romulan culture, or always has been, but
sure, they hate androids, they hate synths. There you go. That explains some stuff, which kind of makes it seem like maybe the people that hacked F8 were potentially this secretive Jacques Vache or whatever they're called.
Well, this episode at this point is implying that the Vat Vache are the big bads.
Yeah. And this scene is intercutting with another scene where they're going to Dodge's apartment to investigate. And I thought the way that the editors did this, I have no idea why they decided to intercut this scene with the scene back at the vineyard. It was super confusing. I don't think it helped the narrative there to kind of be like, we're going back and forth between them, because it's the same characters talking about the same content. So it would have been different if it was two characters searching the apartment and we're cutting between them. So anyway, I thought that was kind of confusing. But that scene there at the apartment, Laris uses some super high-tech, what did you say it was called?
Molecular reconstitutor scanner.
Yeah, to basically reenact or show them the scene that happened. She quickly realizes, oh, the people that did this, they're much better at wiping away their fingerprints than I thought they were.
They didn't just clean it, they scrubbed it.
Oh, it was scrubbed dang clean. So that's what happened here. So she can't get any information on what happened. It's frustrating. She says, maybe there's evidence around here. Picard finds something. He says, you mean like this? And it turns out to be kind of like a computer that displays this kind of virtual display. She immediately starts kind of searching through it and says, well, they scrubbed this too, obviously, and they made everything look like everything else, so we can't differentiate anything on here. Then she has an idea.
Yeah, well, it's a sort of convoluted thing. I think it actually sort of works, but basically, the fact that they're twins, the computer wouldn't differentiate them, so it would have logged information about the twin the same way it would have logged information about the other one. Anyway, she proves that Soji had been in communication with Dodge using that computer, so Dodge did know about her twin, and that the communications were coming in from off-planet. So it's they don't know where, but at least Picard has him to go somewhere.
Yeah,
he has to leave the planet to go on a mission.
Kind of shocked Picard here, like he's like, off planet, what? And I thought, like, I would have assumed in this moment
that stay on Earth,
probably because this, they're always traveling between planets. So why he thought she would necessarily be on Earth, I don't know. But anyway, she's not. They find that out. Is there anything else about that scene that's important?
Just that Soji and Dodge knew about the twin as well, which we were a little confused about in the first episode.
Yeah, because she didn't bring it up. She didn't say to Picard, you need to protect me,
and
I have a twin.
The necklace because her father gave it to her.
Right. So then we go to the Borg cube. This is kind of the second time we're on this cube, and specifically with Soji and Narek. I keep forgetting his name.
Yeah. And remember, so this is just a scene or two after we were introduced to this double super secret, special secret society that the super secret Romulans, who was an actually super secret version of a Romulan, might be a member of.
Don't forget, it's super secret.
It's very secret.
When we see them in this scene, they talk a little bit about the cube. She says she thinks it's beautiful. He's like, really? You find dark things beautiful? It's kind of like this emo moment. They call it the artifact, and he says it's lost, it's severed, it's broken, it's vulnerable. And again, in this scene, the dialogue between the two of them felt a little clunky. I think because of their relationship, it just kind of feels, I don't know, unrealistic, I guess, a little bit. And she says, hey, is this relationship between us going to be one of those relationships we can talk about? And he says, no.
It's a secret relationship.
Yeah, and then she says, well, can you at least tell me something about yourself? And he says, yeah, I'm really secretive, basically. So this is right after the scene where they're like, there's a secret society or this group.
Yeah.
And then he basically says, I'm also very secretive and I don't want to talk about a lot of things. So
at this point, the writers seem to be hitting us over the head that Narek is actually a member of the secret Vatvash, and he's there to be a super secret spy that's sleeping with her to try to learn her secrets.
Right. So that's that scene. Then we move on to back at the vineyard. Picard is doing some gardening, relaxing, and this is when his buddy from the TNG episode Family, is it?
The one right after Best of Both Worlds, yeah.
Yeah, and this is Dr. Benyun. He shows up, and we kind of have the scene where they're hanging out, drinking tea, and he gives Picard a diagnosis, and he says, if you really want the diagnosis, you should maybe drink something stronger than this, kind of implying the news isn't good. He doesn't really say what it is that Picard has, but it's degenerative, and there's only one end to this thing that Picard has, which, I mean, at this point, I guess, like, Picard's character is pretty old anyway, so it's kind of like there's only one end to old age also, so regardless, I don't think that would really affect him much at this point. But
I think there's an implication that it's likely a neurological thing, meaning he's going to sort of lose his
faculties.
Yeah, which is not something that Picard would obviously not like and would be afraid of.
And they also explain that he's not allowed to go into space with this condition, and he says he needs his friend to like give him a pass, like let him go, basically say that he's fit to go, because he's saying.
Although they say otherwise, he's in great condition to go into space.
Yeah, except as he's losing his mind. But anyway, they kind of talk about that a little bit, and basically that's that. He's just kind of hanging out with him. Any other key moments in that scene? Oh yeah, he does kind of say, "You sure you want to go back out into the cold? You really want to do that?" And Picard's like, "Yeah, absolutely." So that's that. We saw a lot of that in the trailers as well.
Yeah, and if you remember that character in the family episode, sort of this was after Locutus of Borg, and Picard was really dealing with the horror of what happened at Wolf 359, and he gives him a choice of saying, "Hey, you could just work under the sea with me." And that's something he really seems to seriously consider, leaving Starfleet and working under the sea. So the character, again, is used as sort of a fork in the road for Picard's choice. And he's like, I'm going off this time. I'm going back into the thick of it.
Yeah, and he's sure of it. He's not worried about it. And again, not worried about this diagnosis. I mean, of course, it's in the back of his mind, and that just gives more character.
So I did have the screenshot of them.
Oh, yeah.
If I can jump to that.
There it is. So there's Picard's friend. That's them talking in the scene. It's kind of a nice scene. I like the tone of the scene. There's like a fire going. It's very like calming. It feels like warm. So then after that scene,
I like all the scenes at the vineyard.
Yeah, it's a nice location.
It feels very homey.
So then we have Picard transporting to Starfleet headquarters. Well, it may not be Starfleet headquarters, but it's one of the main kind of places we see people doing this site-to-site transport, which is cool because we haven't seen that yet in the show. We saw it in the trailers, but we didn't see him use it. He goes into the facility. He looks up, and it looks like the Enterprise D, or at least a Galaxy-class ship floating that looks like Enterprise, and he kind of looks
Well, it shows a Constitution-class ship, and then a Galaxy-class ship. You don't see any insignia on it, but that's sort of an implication. It's the two most famous Enterprises.
Yeah. And it's close enough, anyway, even if it wasn't. He gets greeted by this person at the front desk that says, name please. And
they didn't seem to recognize him.
Like accentuate this, like, who are you? Who is this guy? Like, yeah, like you wouldn't know Jean-Luc Picard. right there, he should have been like, "Come on, men," because that's my Jean-Luc impression. So he says his name. He gives him a little visitor pass, which is also kind of like seeing Jean-Luc with the visitor emblem on, which is just kind of crazy. Anyway, then he ends up in Admiral Kirsten something's off. Kirsten Clancy. Admiral Kirsten Clancy's office. He knows her. You can tell they have history.
Serious drama, I guess.
What's going on, man? And he tries to explain kind of what he thinks is happening. He says, we need to, be doing something about this, whatever. She says, there is no we. She emphasizes that. He says, I kind of like this line. And it was kind of cute, too. There's a lot of stuff Picard does. Maybe, I mean this in, like, the most positive way possible, where I'm like, he just seems like such a sweet man, like, in a lot of stuff he does. And in this moment, he says, I'm even content if you want to demote me from Admiral to Captain.
Yeah.
And I was like,
yeah, I like that one.
Of course you don't mind that. Like, I'll be the captain if I need to.
I'll just be a captain.
Yeah. She also drops the F-bomb in this scene, and I know a lot of people complain about that because they were like, this doesn't feel like the way they would talk. I don't necessarily agree with that.
Yeah,
I don't know why
I was okay with that. I think a couple of the lines that Daj just said doesn't feel like the way people in the future would talk, but we've seen them swear before.
She says dude and stuff like that.
Yeah, but we've seen them swear before, and the way that officers would talk amongst officers, that probably fits.
Yeah, I'm not going to get caught up on any of that stuff. I think it's not a big deal. We don't know how people will talk then, so we don't know. But this scene's very political. I liked it. It felt like almost like a TNG scene, and I don't mean to keep saying that. It's not like it has to feel like TNG, but it felt like one of those scenes where Picard would be discussing something with an admiral and trying to figure out what the course of action should be.
Yeah, in the sense on Star Trek, admirals and commodores are always laughably incompetent, and they're just there to say, you can't do the thing that's obviously the right thing to do, and to create conflict around the choice that the captain has to make. Mm-hmm. And usually at least throughout TNG, the admiral's always not either a straight up like villain, like Norsati, or represents that aspect of Starfleet and doing the wrong thing. Until we have a couple of sort of different dynamics with admirals in Deep Space Nine, when admirals are sort of better characters. Mm-hmm. So she was very much a TNG admiral. The outcome being that basically he wasn't going to get a Starfleet recommission. He's going to have to do it on his own.
Do it a different way.
Rogue, which to me makes sense. I do think that he didn't know any other admirals on Earth that would be more friendly to him. Mm-hmm. Even if a more friendly admiral to him was just like, no, we can't give you a ship to go on a secret mission. That's ridiculous. That would still be a valid outcome. The same outcome makes sense.
Right.
It's just that admiral really did not like Picard. Like, she got into seemed like an old argument about the Romulans and all that stuff. And
I think
it seemed the implication to me was that he did something specifically to undermine her when he quit, or when he did something,
or when he was on, or when he went on the news and
yeah, maybe
did his live interview and said Starfleet is not good.
Yeah,
and that probably would have insulted her a little bit. But yeah, she was pretty ticked off. She said something at the end of it that I thought was kind of weird. She says, "Do what you're good at. Go home." What? Go home? That's what Picard's good at? Maybe she just means because he's been a hermit lately. He's just stayed home.
Later on when she's talking to Commodore, they call him the Hermit of Labar. The Hermit of Labar.
Yeah. We have a couple comments here. Steve says, super secret, but they talk about it a lot. I'm not sure secret agents actually remind each other of the agency they are in. So that's kind of a good point. So it's kind of like commenting on, like, I don't talk about this stuff. What stuff don't you talk about? Oh, the stuff about me being secret. And then McMurray said, they're pushing the Enterprise D a lot in this series, but he would have commanded the E for longer. I wonder if there's a reason for that, if it's purely fan service.
Yeah, well, there's a line that Steve Shive's YouTube channel, when he was doing his look back on Picard, where he says one of his favorite scenes with Picard was in Relics, where he's talking with Scotty on the holographic bridge of the original Enterprise, and he says that he often, or sometimes he feels like he traded all in the super advanced Enterprise D of the time to work on to go back to the Stargazer, a super primitive Constellation class ship. So the ship that he sort of remembers as his ship is probably still the Stargazer Enterprise D, and maybe not Enterprise E, even if he actually would have ended up being on the Enterprise E longer,
Mm-hmm.
which he would have. And the same with his badge. Like he has the badge that was introduced in Generations and sort of became the main badge on Voyager.
With the wings or the little side thingies.
And he would have had that badge, or at least at this point, he would have had that badge a lot, or for quite a long time. I don't know when that badge was introduced as far as his overall career.
I think we got to move on because we got a few more scenes to get through. We're taking a long time with each scene. We did want to break down each scene like specifically, but I think we'll try to move through them maybe a little quicker. Next scene, we're back on the Borg cube, the artifact. This is when we see them actually going to work. So they're putting on these red suits. They then go into a room, the room that has their 0 assimilations for this many days. So we saw that in the trailer, and people were kind of joking about that. So they've been assimilation free for this many days. It was like 4,000 days or something like that. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, it was 3,000 and something, which people did the math on it before.
So there's a new employee, or there's a new woman that's come to work here.
True.
And they talk a little bit, and there's this weird comment. We're getting into too many details again, but like we just watched it, right? So there's this weird comment about I didn't know Romulans were that hot, and she's talking about Narek, and like she's like, ooh, he's a really good looking Romulan. I don't know, whatever's going on.
Yeah, I think the thing I got most out of that scene, it was just super like, well, there was a new person, so there was a reason for everyone to explain stuff, but the Romulans were using the same Romulan disruptor rifles that the super secret Vought Josh assassins were using when they were going after Dodge.
Vought Josh now.
Or whatever, Jot Vosh. So if they're trying to be super secret assassins that you can't tell are Romulans, why were they
the same weapons?
Why are they using the obvious Romulan disruptor rifles?
Yeah. So anyway, the guy giving the speech in the room says, "Don't cross over into the gray zone." And it's kind of like, okay, so he's like warning everyone.
Yeah. And if your badge blinks green,
run. And then Soji's kind of joking with the new person, kind of saying, "Oh, don't worry, it's not that scary. It's not that serious." But they are saying, we're on this X-Borg facility. Like anything that looks strange, could be strange.
Yeah, and it reveals that what they're doing there, for the broader sense, it seems like the Romulans are trying to get Borg technology and benefit from selling Borg technology that they're taking from this abandoned Borg cube. Mm-hmm. But what Soji is specifically doing is helping these doctors take off Borg implants and maybe...
Yeah, but we don't go to that scene yet. It cuts to the vineyard first.
Oh.
And then it goes back to the Borg cube. But the thing I was going to say is this guy giving the speech also says that the collective doesn't care about the Borg cube anymore. That once the cube has been kind of taken out of their control, they disconnect. The collective disconnects from it. So that kind of explained away any thoughts I had on wouldn't the collective maybe try to...
I think, I don't know if we said this live or not, but I don't think the Borg collective itself are going to be characters in this arc. I think it's all going to be X-Borg and Romulans. I don't think the Borg collective itself is going to be a character.
And I don't know, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think, why have the Borg technology if you're not going to at some point at least hint to the Borg being a threat of some sort? Because they were always the worst, the biggest villain.
Yeah.
But, you could be right.
To me, that doesn't fit the storylines that they are applying they want to tell. But
we will see. We are going to do a video later about kind of our predictions and things that we think will happen in the rest of the season. So stay tuned for that. I think this video is going to go on YouTube, but then we're going to do the next video not live and edit it and have that up as our regular kind of weekly video. Scene 9, we're back at the vineyard. Agnes is now there talking to Picard. He says this line about, "I never really cared for science fiction." And
they pointed the Isaac Asimov complete
she has the book.
robot collection.
Yeah, and he says in response to that, "I never really cared for science fiction." He says something like, "It never really made sense to me."
Which doesn't ring true. If someone's interested in political philosophy and history, then we talked about a little bit about that when I was talking about the roots of political philosophy in science fiction and pro-science fiction. It feels like there'd be a crossover there. It just doesn't ring true for that character. I think it's more a ironic joke, the fact that he is a character in science fiction, that he wouldn't be a character by himself, but I don't think he would view himself that way, and that the real Picard would actually be into some science fiction. Mm-hmm. Which is interesting because they call it classical literature too, which would make sense because at this point that would be 300-400-year-old books too.
There you go. Another couple comments. The Trill friend is definitely going to be assimilated, is something McMurray said. So that's an interesting prediction. We'll see.
She does seem to be set up for something bad to happen to her.
Yeah, they're kind of already bonding, and they're like around these.
Yeah.
Don't if it blinks green, run. So maybe it'll be like one of those situations. Steve said also warned everyone that if the thing goes green, they have to run. Same as though actual Borg are at risk. Seems as though actual Borg are at risk.
Right. I think something's going to happen there, and they're going to when they leave. But I don't think it's going to be the collective itself.
Right.
I mean, nanites can do funky things without the Borg collective actually being involved.
Yeah, we'll see. And then he also said, to that point, not sure they will have the actual Borg, but at least rogue drones who aren't very nice.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so we were talking about the scene at the vineyard with Agnes. She talks then about Bruce Maddox making Daj and Soji. She then kind of confirms that. We had a theory in one of the other episodes that he had been involved in the making of them, but that maybe Data still had some part to play in it, because our question was, how did Bruce Maddox see the paintings? How did he know to make them after the paintings? When would he have seen the paintings?
So this is one of two things that really crushed two theories that we had about it. I did that entire video about how I think it only makes sense for Data to have actually initially started creating Daj, and that would mean hopefully that we're going to get the holographic father version of Data as a chip in her arm. But in this scene, she just arbitrarily says it totally makes sense, like she's talking directly to the viewer. It totally makes sense that Maddox would make androids based on this painting.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it doesn't really make sense at all, because it doesn't make sense that he would have seen the painting or would have made that connection necessarily. I mean, there's still problems with it, but they just the writers seem to just be saying this totally makes sense. We're done. So I don't think that's going to come back up. It's
like they're not going to revisit it. So that's also where they talk about how her whole history was a work of fiction. That there's no records on her before 3 years ago. Her entire identity was built then. That confirmed that. So then they go back to working with the Borg. We cut back to the Borg cube, and this is where they're actually in this room and they're taking implants off Borg. And I wrote they are de-Borgifying them.
Right. So I think what it implies is that when they came to this Borg cube, there was a bunch of basically shut down, deactivated drones in the cube, and that they were put in stasis. And they're one by one taking them out of stasis, and they seem to be trying to take the implants out of them and maybe, if possible, reviving them. Some of them seem to have been revived. At least they showed shots of ex-Borg doing work around the cube.
Mm-hmm.
I think the real key thing that we get from this scene, though, is that Narek is watching Soji work and express sort of sympathy and emotion for the ex-Borg.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like the strong implication at this point is that Narek is this secret cabal guy from the Vat Vash, but that he's already sort of being turned and is falling in love with the target of his spy job.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about that in our predictions video, because I think I have a prediction now because of that there will be a scene where he says, no, I actually do love you, even though I've been a spy and I wouldn't have hurt you. And then she has to say, well, I don't trust you. And there's this kind of sad moment there. So like maybe he does, because there's already building some stress between him and who calls him her baby brother. I don't know if they're actually
we'll get to Risso
related. Yeah, we'll get to that. But it's one of those things where I think that's going to maybe come up later.
I mean, we're not going to get to this, I'll throw it in there. At one point, it implies that Laris and Jaban might actually be brother and sister instead of a couple.
We've had a few of those
too, which is interesting.
Yeah, so de-Borgifying them. He's watching her. A lady in the room who's working on the board calls them the Nameless race, or Nameless, and Soji comments and says, why do you call them that? Give them a name. And she's like, Nameless is a name. But again, showing that Soji has empathy for other races, those who maybe others would look down on or whatever. So this might be something else that Narek is watching and saying, oh, what a sweet person she is.
Yeah, and so at this point, all the scenes we've seen Soji or Daj in, they've been very emotional scenes. They're either sort of romance scenes or scenes where she's expressing a lot of empathy for something, or scenes where she's on the run and expressing a lot of like fear and insecurity or invulnerability for something. All things that aren't very Data-like.
Also, Soji seems very happy with freeing Borg from their robot parts. Where she is a robot, maybe she hates robots. This is Steve saying that.
They're definitely
Does she know that?
Gradually. She doesn't know she's a robot yet, presumably, because she hasn't been activated. but they're definitely leading towards some sort of comparison between the ex-Borg and synths, and what the relationship is maybe synthetics and ex-Borg are, or at least a parallel or something's going on there.
Yeah.
And there's also an overall reason, presumably, that Soji's character was sent here, just like Dodge's character was being sent back to the Daystrom Institute by Maddox, her father. Who knows?
Right. Now we're back at the vineyard. There's a nice fire going. This is the scene where he takes out the comm badge. He has it in a little case, and this is kind of him reflecting on, when he was Starfleet. Then he makes a call. He hits the comm badge.
Yeah,
he uses it. He uses it to call Raffi. He says, "Don't hang up. I need a ship. Don't hang up." I don't know what would hanging up look like with one of these. Like, would you throw it or something? So don't hang up. I need a ship. Obviously, she's not super. There's some bad history between the two of them. That maybe she usually hangs up on him. Then we go to Starfleet, and we're hanging out with the Admiral, and I think this is the first time she's talking to Commodore. And someone makes the comment of, "We thought we had mothballed him." So basically, he was old and they weren't going to have to ever deal with Picard again. She explains to the Commodore what Picard had said, and that she kind of says that's crazy talk. And yet you can tell that as the scene was happening, I think I said to you, the next scene, or one of the next scenes, is going to be her going
not even the next scene. She's going to be then immediately talking.
Picard's on to us. You could just tell this was going to happen. So then,
well, it's worth noting that Commodore O is implied to be the head of Starfleet security, or the high up in Starfleet security, and hasn't made it clear. I suspect she's probably going to have a connection to Section 31. There's sort of an inverted power dynamic with the character that's interviewed right now, Lieutenant Risso. So she immediately calls in Lieutenant Risso, and she challenges Lieutenant Risso on the cleanup job on the attack. So it seems that this Starfleet Commodore knew about what was going on with the super secret assassin Romulans, presumably working for Jot Vosh. She starts mentioning Jot Vosh too, so she seems to know about the Jot Vosh and the connection with Jot Vosh that Lieutenant Risso has. But she's ordering Lieutenant Risso around, saying, "You've got to solve this problem." And she's like, "Okay, I'll go kill Picard." And she's like, "No, I'll take care of Picard if that's a problem. We think he's cool now. He's not going to do. We think that the Admiral stopped him." I don't know why they would think that, because the dynamics seem to be not like that at all. But anyway, they're like, "I'll worry." Commodore O says, "I'll worry about Picard. You take care of your guy you have working on this super important
Who's
mission."
the guy going to be?
Who's the guy going to be?
We still don't know at this point who it's going to be, but it's pretty dang obvious. But
yeah, we know.
Then we have the vineyard, Picard talking to Laris and Zhaban about how he's going to go back into space, and they're like, "Are you an idiot?" She's really ticked off. Laris is. I've really enjoyed these characters with Picard. I think I like the dynamic between them and how they kind of are very protective. We talked about this before. They have this really great respect for Picard. I kind of like this relationship. I almost could see a show just around Picard's life on the vineyard and these two, and almost more of a comedy.
I'm a little disappointed at this point that this is the last we're probably going to see them for a few episodes.
Yeah, because she even says to Zhaban, "You need to go with him into space." If he's
she doesn't say. She's pissed off about him, but yeah.
I think she says that before she leaves the room. "You're going with him." And then when she leaves the room, he says, and Picard actually says, "No, you stay here. The grapes are in more danger than I am." Which I don't see how.
They're same behind. The key thing about this scene for me is that he mentions that Worf is still alive, and he mentions that LaForge is still alive. This is Zhaban mentions it, but the point being, LaForge is still alive. I was worried that maybe it made sense for him to be working at Utopia Planitia when the attack was happening, although it's now happening a lot earlier than I thought. So I was worried about Geordi being dead and that being part of the guilt that Picard felt around that attack, but it looks like he's still alive. And this is also a scene where Picard's like, "No, I don't want to work with those people. I need to go off and create my own crew."
Yeah, it made me sad because, I knew this. I knew that he wasn't going to work with the old crew, but it was just confirmation that I need a new crew. And it was interesting because there was specifically a line that said, "You need a crew that hates you and has nothing to lose," because he was commenting on how his old crew, like, they were too close, and he owed it to them to like not ask them to help again. So you need a crew that hates you and has nothing to lose. So
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, it wasn't that convincing as a reason. I overall,
I get it,
I
but-
buy it as the point of the narrative is that he's not going back to his old crew. He's outside of Starfleet and has a different sort of mission he's going on.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at.
And yeah, and you mentioned that LaForge, we had this theory that LaForge might be dead after the Mars attacks, but anyway, obviously that's not the case. Which that's a positive. I like that. I like that.
No, I'm
LaForge
happy
is alive.
LaForge is alive.
A
I was worried about
couple
it.
comments. Mac Murray said Laris is an awesome character. I agree. I think Laris is really cool.
Yeah, I totally agree.
There's definitely a plan to have both Soji and Dodge in those specific places. It's sounding like they were created for a purpose. Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that.
Yeah, but the question is whose purpose? So it seems like her father, probably Maddox, has some.
He had
purpose
he
there.
created them for some purpose.
In the next scene, there's a couple lines where just to jump ahead because we're talking about the purpose here, where the Vat Vash are saying everything is at stake, and that the reason that what they're trying to figure out here is found the nest. So it implies that Maddox has more synths that he's created that are on a larger sort of mission.
Absolutely.
That is in some sort of larger conflict.
Take out the nest, you take out the rest. Is the old saying that my parents used to tell me if we were getting rid of bees and hornets. That's actually not true, but it does sound like a saying. Take out the nest, you take out the rest. It's kind of the impression they're giving here, though. Like, go after the guy who makes the synths, and you can maybe rid the world of synths forever. Synths and androids.
Well, that's the implication of why they haven't just killed Soji yet. That she still has information they want.
Right, and they weren't supposed to kill Dodge. They were supposed to just capture her also, but she actively...
They sucked at that.
They sucked at that. And then Picard goes to visit Raffi, and she's living off the grid. She's kind of like, in this... Well, she's near the rock, the...
Vasquez Rock. Which is just outside of Los Angeles, so she's presumably on Earth.
She's living in like a trailer motorhome type thing.
She's in like the cliche trailer.
There's something about the scene I really liked, though. One thing, Steve's watching, he might have heard this. There's a moment where you almost hear what sounds like the Shire music when he arrives. Like, you almost hear like the flutes from like the Shire. So immediately I kind of thought like, oh, it's like, it just felt like nice, and I don't know, like they're old friends. Like, oh, Gandalf. But then the other thing is that he starts to leave because she's like, I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah, she has like a gun out, and she's like,
Yeah.
get out of here.
And this was cliche, but I did like it. He walks away and he's like, so you don't want to know about
Super secret Romulans.
super secret Romulans and spies and stuff? And she's like, wait a minute, is that wine? She asks the year of the wine. And he turns, he's got it in a little bag. And of course he's got like wine for the, I don't know. I just thought it was really great.
Yeah, it was.
So she's in after that, I think.
The funny is that it was sort of a cliched scene, and it was so short that sort of the cliched worked. And I guess what I liked about the scene is he didn't like outright say like, "Oh, Picard, I really hate you because of our backstory." You just got that dynamic because of the way they interacted. So it wasn't like they showed it. They didn't tell you in that scene.
Exactly, yeah.
So it actually worked as a scene.
I want to read this comment right now because I think if this is the case, I love it. Maybe he's trying to resurrect Data, and those places have what he needs. So maybe Maddox is trying... That was Mac Murray saying that. Maybe Maddox is trying to resurrect Data, and in order to do that, he needs Dodge. She was going to the Daystrom Institute. She needed Soji with the Borg. Like, maybe there's the technology there. So maybe, yeah, I mean, maybe that's part of the plan is to resurrect Data. I would love that. I'd still love it if, like, that was part of the plan. I know, obviously, they said if he had one of his single kind of neurons from his network.
Well, I think if you actually wanted to resurrect Data, recreated Data, the two places you'd want to go are where actual Soong was working. So there's that original planet. I forget the name of it. It's in Data lore. It was pretty much destroyed by the crystalline entity.
Lore. Oh, yeah, you always call it that.
Anyway, it was just basically destroyed by the crystalline entity, but there still was lore, and there still was his office there. And then there was another planet that when we actually met Soong that he was on, and that's when he had the motion chip for Data at that point. And then we run into lore again at that point as well. So presumably one of those spots is where Maddox actually is.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Maddox, because he became friends with Data, like, I'm sure he's trying to also, that's got to be part of his goal.
But to be honest, I don't think At this point, I don't think we're going to see Data again.
I'm holding out hope.
I think Data at this point is just going to be through Soji as like what's left of Data. Remember, there were some lines early on.
I poured you more.
Oh, thank you. About I think Brent Spiner or Patrick Stewart said basically that Data isn't actually in this season that much, but he's present in another way a lot, and I think that's just going to be Soji. I don't know if we're going to get.
That's true. So just a couple more
back.
comments here. Steve just says, seems like Maddox is also who involved Picard. If the mother character is actually helping her and not just a bad guy, it doesn't seem like the bad guys are happy Picard is involved. So yeah, so maybe that was through Maddox trying to get Picard back involved. I think that makes sense. And also Mac Murray says, also Data had interaction in First Contact with the Borg, which is absolutely true. So who knows the connection there?
Yeah, and they did do sort of a reverse assimilation where they used Borg cybernetic technology to give him the skin that's some feeling, and there was again that sort of reflection of him being a perfection and the opposite of what the Borg are, and the opposite of humanity is in that dynamic.
Yeah, but they're all like the connections between synths, androids, Borg. You know, the rights of these, because there was the episode where there was in the film where Picard could have, it wasn't an episode where Picard could have killed the Borg with Hugh by sending Hugh back with an infection, and he chose not to and it's similar with the crystalline entity. Like Picard was always kind of protecting
life,
races or life in any way, even if the life could harm humanity. So you kind of had this interaction between Borg. They are similar in some ways to androids, but they are human mixed with technology. So that it's kind of cool because I guess Daj and Soji kind of are also, because they're synthetic. They have flesh and blood, but they're also androids. So they're kind of more like Borg than Data ever was.
Yeah, cybernetic. But I think at the core, your brains is either a biological brain that we already understand the nature, or we already understand has consciousness, and then an artificial brain, and whether you can actually merge consciousness or merge sentience and make the stable positronic net brain that would allow this to happen is sort of the key difference, the key question of what's going on.
Absolutely. So we're almost done this. We've been going, how long have we been going here? Almost 50 minutes. So we're I think an hour is okay for a live video. So
this is our longest video.
Oh my. So we'll probably wrap it up here in a couple minutes. The last scene was back on the Borg cube. Now we have, I keep forgetting his name. Narek. Narek is on the cube, and Risso shows up. She shows up in kind of like hologram form or whatever to talk to him. And this is when, so earlier you mentioned who could be the guy that's...
To be honest, earlier, I'll bring up now, it was so obvious that Narek was a secret Vatvash. I thought that it was sort of a double bluff from the writers, and that he was actually a good Tel Shiar guy that was there to protect her from the Vatvash, and we were going to assume one thing and it would be subverted. But no, it turns out he's just working for the Vatvash.
Yeah, it looks like that's who it is.
But he's falling in love.
He's falling in love. I mean, that's what it looks like. Maybe that will be a double, like, you think that's what's happening, but he's doing that just to trick her. I think he's falling for her. So we find out in that scene that she is also Romulan, in a not so subtle way also, because he says something like, your ears being rounded, I'm still not used to that, or I don't remember exactly the line, but like clearly saying she had not rounded ears and that she's been surgically altered or whatever to look human.
Which is what, super secret spies talk about, is how they look completely different.
Right, Steve? So also, she doesn't trust him in the way he wants to deal with Soji. Her way failed with Daj.
It was the classic cliche, like spy talking with their handler thing, where like I can do it my way and it'll work out. He's like, no, we should just kill them. And no, I'm not really falling in love. Like it was super cliche. The most interesting thing to me is that there's a sort of inverted power dynamic. So if you remember, the admiral goes to the Commodore O, and an admiral is ahead of a Commodore, but the Commodore sort of lies to the admiral. And it's like, oh, there's nothing going on here. But she really knew all about what was going on, and she's worried about it. And in this scene, the Commodore outranks the Lieutenant Risso. But Lieutenant Risso in this scene is talking about the Commodore as a useful ally. So the actual power dynamic seems to be inverted of the way it should be. So what it basically means is that Risso is actually a Vatvash, an undercover Romulan,
as well as Narek.
as well as Narek, but he is an openly secret.
Right, but they think
Romulan
she's human.
who's also super secret. Well, as
Sorry, when I
Commodore
say
O,
they, I mean Commodore O thinks she's human.
well, Commodore O knows about the Vatvash and seems to know that she was the one in charge of the Romulan assassins and stuff. But at least, so I don't know exactly what O knows. It's a little confusing because she definitely knows about the Vatvash. But either way, she isn't human. She's actually a secret Vatvash,
Right.
and she thinks she's in control of the Admiral.
Right.
Sorry. She's
the Commodore.
She's manipulating the Commodore, but that if this stuff doesn't work out here, the Commodore's going to get angry. I think by her language of the Commodore as a useful ally is implying the Commodore herself is not actually a member of Vatvash.
Right.
Meaning,
She's still just Federation.
She's Federation.
She might be, you said maybe Section
31. I don't know if Section 31 is even going to be part of this. I know that there's talk again about that other Section 31 spinoff again. And whenever a super secret Federation is probably Section 31, so probably, and that would be a reason why she's like subverting the normal command structure and things like that, and working with. So maybe there's a reason that Section 31 is working with Vatvash, or in the past had worked with Vatvash.
Mm-hmm. Mac Murray says, I think the Commodore is a sympathizer.
A sympathizer with the Vatvash or with the Romulans in general? He won't be able to respond right away because there's a delay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can't.
Well, once he responds, I'll let you know. But I think probably with the Romulans as a whole, because the overriding arc isn't just the Vatvash, but also that Federation wanted to stop working and helping Romulans.
She didn't. I don't remember if she said everything is. Oh. No, Risso says everything's at stake, but Commodore O says similar things about this is a really. She says I don't have to tell you how important the mission that this guy is on is. So she seems to really care about this mission against the.
He said the Mars attack was probably a joint effort between factions in the Federation and factions of the Romulans. Yeah.
At this point, I
feel like the Federation parts of the Federation were aware of it, whether it was.
Well, this episode seems to strongly imply that it's the Vatvash who have hacked in, even though they hate computers, into the synths and got them to do the attack. And maybe even not as many people died. In the past, it's sort of implied this might be some sort of false flag thing that the Federation are in on, or Section 31 within the Federation is in on.
He thinks a sympathizer with the Vatvash, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're now at, what are we at here? 55 minutes, so we're going to finish up. The last thing in that scene, it seemed like they were actually siblings too, these two Romulans, unless she's just using this as a term of affection, but she says baby brother to Narek. So
yeah, and she says about like, I really care about your life, only second to my life.
Yeah, so there's actually, I'm just going to say this right now, the twin thing, there's like lots of parallels because there's the two Romulans that are helping Picard that are potentially brother and sister. Then there's the two Romulans that are trying to work with Soji and get information from her that are potentially Romulan brother and sister. So maybe the twin thing, they're trying to do like parallels on both sides, just as a storytelling element. That might be kind of cool. Anyway, she says, has the machine given up the location of its fellow abominations, to the baby brother? So she's clearly talking about Soji. Using that kind of language too, if Narek has any potential love for Soji, would even drive him further if someone else starts talking about her even more, like hatefully.
Did she actually? I remember she said found the nest. Did she actually use the word abomination?
I wrote it down. I'll have to go back and check the episode.
That is another term that comes right from Dune, and when they talk, the way they talk about.
Yeah, we'll have to check the episode again. But right now, I'm going to go with it because I did write it down. I don't think I would have written that down if she hadn't said it. So, has the machine given up the location of its fellow abominations? Is what I wrote down.
Yeah. So all this stuff seems super inspired by Dune.
But regardless, I think in that situation, if he's starting to fall for her, he might be like, you just called the girl I like an abomination. Like, it would almost push him further to protect her, maybe? I don't know. But that's the end of the episode. I also noticed that scene all of a sudden ended, end credits happened, and it was one of those things where, again, it felt cut short. And it probably was. I think they're editing it, and then it goes on to CBS, and maybe they're... Like, editing is a very nuanced thing. I've edited stuff before, and every little moment can help the pacing feel better. And
You've
sometimes,
edited our videos, which are fantastically edited, except for this one, of course, because it's just an hour-long live.
yeah,
video.
you kind of edited this one because you've been putting in. Oh, what other clips do we have? Maybe we should just show those
No,
before
it's
we
too
finish
late.
up. It's too late. Huh?
We got,
Yeah, we should have used those.
Well, there's Risso, and this is the final scene.
That's the
Risso-
final scene. So there you go. That's Risso and Narek, and that's where she kind of comes in as a hologram. And they have this scene where we find out that they potentially are brother and sister. You can see her ears are rounded, which he comments on. That she's supposedly, altered to look human.
Surgically altered Romulan.
And
Anyway,
there you go. And that's the end of that episode. Credits roll. There was a little tag at the end of the episode of what's to come next. There's some cool stuff in there. I don't remember specifically, but I'm sure you watched it yourself, and if you haven't, check it out. But I'm still excited about the new episodes, upcoming episodes. I again didn't like this as much as the first one because I feel like it didn't really add too much to what we already knew. And again,
it felt very short, and like we didn't get too far along with the story.
Yeah, no new characters really. There was one, but we didn't really get to know
There were
her.
some interesting reveals and some like implications about what's next that we talked a lot about. And my other sort of final thought is it didn't alleviate some of the fears I have about the quality of writing that we're getting.
Sorry, I was reading some comments. But
No, I was just saying,
a little awkward pause
sort of
there.
a
I
final
agree, though,
thought
yeah.
there is that it didn't really alleviate the quality of writing. A couple things that people say about writing is that you're supposed to show it, don't tell it.
Mhm.
And
Show, not tell.
too often we get characters just telling things instead of showing ideas, which is leads to very sort of awkward scenes, awkward dialogue. And there's a lot of situations that I find a lot with sort of problematic writing where you sort of see behind the curtain, and the question is that character actually that character, or is it a double bluff because is that the way they would write it, or is that not the way they would write it? Or when you're sort of analyzing the nature of the way it's being written more than actually believing it as a consistently self-consistent series of events in a narrative is sort of a sign, which to me is sort of an odd criticism because I actually think so far this is I like the overall story. I like the things that he's dealing with. I like the fact that Picard's going on this mission. I still actually like all the characters that are being introduced, and I definitely want to see more. It just feels like if they just had had a better editor or someone going over the dialogue and said it's like, no, we can cut out a bunch of this dialogue or simplify this dialogue or just slightly. It just seems like that's the type of stuff that would be the easy part.
But I almost feel like
show.
from working on like projects and writing, it almost feels like the dialogue is over edited. It almost feels like there was too many eyes on the dialogue, and they tried to fit too much subtext and exposition within dialogue that they thought was clever. But it's so hard. There's a very fine line between clever dialogue that has a lot of subtext and the subtext being like hitting you over the head, and you're like, yeah, we get what we're trying to read between the lines here. Like saying, oh, your ears, I'm not used to them rounded, or whatever the line was. It's like they're trying to say you're a Romulan, you're not human. And we got it, and it's like that could have still been done in a more subtle way. But there's a few examples of
that. They could have
that.
showed that. And that's what I think we felt. I felt like we spent the entire episode just trying to unpack all those types of lines.
There was a few times where it was like, can you pause that so we can listen to it again and figure out what was being said there? So, yeah, there was a lot to unpack. A couple more comments before we finish up here. And thanks, everyone, for watching. I don't know how many people in total, maybe like 4. We're just starting out, so
we
it's
had 4
cool.
people watching?
Oh, yeah. 400,000. No, that even 2, it's cool to see you guys watching. And Steve, Mac, thanks, guys. We have another comment. But there was a comment. Mac Marie said, so there's more than 2. Are you talking about Soji and Daj and maybe more than 2 clones?
Yeah, that must be what you're talking about.
Potentially. I don't know. I think I was just saying there's maybe everything kind of comes in pairs maybe with the episode. Like they're trying to parallel everything with like, I don't know.
No, but they definitely say they talk about a nest and other synths. So.
Oh, sure. Okay, so if that's what you're referring to, then yeah, definitely.
But I don't
maybe
know
not more than 2 of Daj and Soji.
Yeah,
they might have been unique and special because it was like.
But that's
daughter.
only based on Agni saying they come in 2s.
But also that it was like daughter.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then Steve said they seem to be implying they were using Soji to find all of Maddox's robots. So yes, correct.
That's Narek's whole mission right now, which he seems to be botching.
Yeah, well, falling in love. Is that botching or is that finding out the true mission of life? So Steve says, did seem like a lot of things were lazily shoved down our throat. We are all sort of knew that the synths were probably mistreated. I agree with that. I think the way that they kind of even...
You mean the first scene?
Yeah, even prior to 14 years... Sorry, even 14 years ago, before the Mars attacks, when they were like, don't talk about it like that.
Yeah,
don't talk about the synth like that.
They're all super mean.
And then they said like, but it's just a synth. It's not human. We don't care.
They were all Dr. Pulaski's.
But they had Starfleet officers bullying them and being so over the top. Was as if they hadn't interacted with the synth before.
I agree, but you got to remember that in that scene they only had like 20 seconds to establish the entire dynamic and what was going on there, and I was and they also had to get into the point about it being a first contact day and then being the skeleton crew there, and then their relationship with the synth. So I'm more accepting of awkward dialogue when it actually makes sense in that setting. So I was a little okay. And at least they didn't say they took our jobs.
Right.
Which wouldn't make any sense.
Note, yeah, no, there was some stuff that wasn't great. And like, yes, we get it. Like, and then being kind of rude to the synths. It's like, I don't think in the situation it would have realistically been happening that way. I don't think they're used to probably working with synths. So you'd just be like, yeah, whatever. Anyway, cool. This has been fun. We'll probably I think we're going to do a weekly live stream potentially and a weekly video as well on top of that. But the live stream will probably be on YouTube. We tried to do the YouTube live stream. We didn't realize you had to wait 24 hours once you try to do a live stream for YouTube to kind of approve you for a live stream. So there's that. So that's why we're on Facebook. That's fine. We'll probably put this video up on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Overall, again, liking the new series. We're going to keep watching and stay tuned for more content from myself. From himself.
That's me.
From ourself. And as always, I'm going to do the closing line. And as always, I hope we kept you engaged.
Make it so. That's another one of his catchphrases.
He says that.